top 5 roadblocks to ACC expansion. As I see it, just from the outside looking in. Number 5, SMU does not get the East Coast excited. Now, I can tell you that I actually kind of like the idea of SMU in there. Maybe selfishly, if Florida State winds up staying in that conference, that they might come to Dallas and play a game every now and again. But again, that's maybe kind of a pipe dream too. But I just think that when you take SMU to some of these schools in the East Coast, it just does not get them excited. It does not bring them the money that they think. And even with SMU saying, we'll give back all the money for 5 years or to 7 years, just doesn't move the needle for them as much in improving what they want distribution-wise in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of getting into Texas, so to speak, is great. I think getting new territory is great for the ACC, but, is adding them enough to offset all of the other complaints about the money gap and things like that? I don't know that they're that exciting, no. I don't think this suddenly makes FSU go, oh, wow, like $3 million more for the next 7 years, and now we go to Texas maybe every other year? Sweet. I don't think that solves the dilemma that they're currently facing. It might help put a Band-Aid on it, but I don't know. This just seems to run a lot deeper than magically adding 3 teams and everybody's going to be all good after that. I don't buy that at this point.
Yeah, and this is becoming the roller coaster, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like one day there seems to be momentum, and then there might even be more momentum, and the next day you wake up or you go to bed right before there's a story that there are roadblocks, and then who knows where it is today.
And the big difference is there's a very lengthy contract behind all this with hundreds of millions of dollars, and so it's different in that there's not a player that's got a – well, I guess there is technically with the Pac-12-4. There's still a player that's got a TV deal coming up, and so, I mean, they need to know just to know what their next step needs to be. Like, do we need to start going and wooing the Mountain West? Or not that they'd have to woo, but you know what I mean. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's some exciting elements about SMU, but it just, again, it doesn't answer all the major questions that need to be answered.
Yep. Number 4, Stanford and Cal don't add football value, and I put an asterisk here. I don't want to hear about the history of them. I appreciate it. They both have some pretty good history, particularly Stanford. But they have good history. But it's not about that history. There's a reason that they're out the outside looking in, and that the Bay Area market doesn't bring what it would comparatively to some of the other major markets. They don't have a lot of enthusiasm for their teams right now. And you're talking about hoping that Stanford and Cal add football value for the next 6 or 7 years so that you can maybe get some momentum as the other conferences, all of which, the SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12 will have another television deal before you're even market again. So 2 deals, in fact, more than likely for everybody else. And so Cal and Stanford, especially in this 5 to 7 year window, don't add that much football value, or they don't look like they're about to. So that's not something that's going to make everybody happy when you're going to get, is the Cal versus UNC game going to knock your ratings up all that high? It's probably not.
I think they're as valuable as the TV networks decide that they are.
Yeah.
And so how much is somebody willing to pay for those teams? I don't think it's necessarily anything that they've done. I know you speak to fan apathy or just a lack of passion compared to other places, and I think that was very indicative with what happened with the Big 12. I think that's going to be a pleasant thing for those 4 schools, that they're going to see like how fired up people get in Stillwater and Ames and Manhattan and elsewhere, Lubbock for these games. I think it's going to be a little bit of a departure, other than when they maybe played Oregon or Washington or something. But yeah, I think it's all about what the TV networks say, and on the surface, it doesn't appear that they add the amount that would be needed to, again, make it whole and make everybody happy and fat at the table, unless just like Amazon swooped in and is like, we'd love to have, I don't know, but I don't see with strings tightening in purses all around the country why these two would suddenly make somebody want to open up their pocketbooks for a conference that's under contract, for quite a while. But I know expansion can open that up. So, yeah, I mean, what is the TV network willing to offer? That's their value.
Yeah. 3, letting Notre Dame have too much influence. And we talked about this earlier in the show, and I'm not trying to come down on Notre Dame on this, except for the fact that, look, they could solve the problem the ACC is having in one fell swoop. So I just think because Jack Swarbrick and Notre Dame feel that Stanford and Cal should be in, you shouldn't just go, okay, sure, because you think so, we're going to do it. Because, again, they're going to be all right. Notre Dame's going to be all right. So you saying, like, I really feel bad that these two great academic institutions are not going to have a place, a high-profile place for their sports. Well, yeah, that sucks, but they're also kind of there, A, of their own doing, and B, Notre Dame, you can solve the problem. And if the condition was, if Cal and Stanford join, we're in, then I think the ACC should do that deal, but that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, I've made myself clear here. I understand their power. It's not like I don't think they have it that they had 25 or 30 years ago, but they still have it, and everybody would want them in their conference. But it's interesting to me that they have clout in a sport which they're not a part of in a conference who they are a part of in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, I get why they have clout. I mean, it is Notre Dame, and your key to making everybody fat and happy would be to get them to join in football. That's where your influx of $80 million or so is going to come in, and all of a sudden maybe you can sit there and tell Florida State, hey, the Irish are coming with Cal and Stanford, and we got $100 million new money on the table, and, then, hey, SMU's not paying, or, there's Notre Dame changes the entire landscape in one fell swoop. And so, yeah, to your point, Paul, they could solve this. They're the ones that have been the most outspoken about wanting those two teams in, and it sounds like they want to have their cake and eat it too. And I know it's like, well, why should anybody let them? Well, they've been letting them do it for years, so why is it changing now? But, yeah, I mean, if they really want it that badly, then they'd have to, in some ways sacrifice – no, they'd have to sacrifice their independence to ensure it. But first you're going to try to not do that and see what happens. Like, what if they don't do it, and then tomorrow the ACC gets together and decides, you know what, we've flipped so-and-so's mind since the other night and so-and-so's mind since the other night, and now we have the votes. Sorry, Florida State and Clemson or whoever. That's still a possibility until it's not.
Yeah.
And then once that's not a possibility, if they meet tomorrow and there's still like no traction, then you go, all right, Notre Dame, how badly do you want them? But right now I don't think you have to do that to ensure it. There's still a chance you cannot do that and still get your way.
And the reason I said that Notre Dame could solve it, I think that the only school that could make ESPN open up a 13-year contract agreement would be Notre Dame, whose contract is coming up.
Right.
So because Notre Dame's contract is coming up and they can, open that up, I think ESPN would have been like, okay, well, now there's a new player at the table.
Sure.
So that's the only thing. That's why Notre Dame could solve it. But
I'm just saying from a standpoint of they don't have to necessarily, like, let's see, maybe Stanford, Cal get in anyways.
Yeah.
And then, but if they don't and it's clearly a brick wall, then, Notre Dame, how badly do you want this?
Yeah.
But does that solve, again, the Florida State discontent? How much money are we talking? And that's the part that's still far bigger than, where the Cardinal or the Golden Bears play.
Look, I do think, and if Notre Dame were to join the ACC, if you have a top four in your conference historically, and I'm not talking about right now. I mean, one of them is right now. The others are more historic. But your top four are Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, and Miami, and then you throw in North Carolina and basketball and all the other things that you can do. I think that's as a heavy hitter top four as you can make. With history behind them.
With who's available.
With who's available, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be a thing again. They could solve it. They're not going to, but they could. Number 2, cross-country travel. I think that Miami is one I don't think that would really want to go for this. And that this is the thing that if they do it, I think this is the conference that will start like maybe moving forward of eventually, all right, look, we can't keep doing – it can be fine for football. Miami and Stanford only play once every 3 years probably in the most optimistic, and everybody and all that would rotate through. But again, it would be so exhausting because it's not even like the Big Ten where you can stop in the middle. The middle is Louisville, which is not really that far west of most things. So I think that's probably what's going to undo this because you're having to go to, 12 schools have to approve this of the 15, and you're going to 15 schools and you're saying, okay, Boston College, how much do you want to spend on sending your Olympic sports across the country? That's the thing I think that issue will probably be united across the board for all 15 of them. How many of them are willing to do it or not? I think that's the one, to me, the crux of the issue that would maybe be able to swing some people on the fence that are intending to stay in the ACC.
One of the questions I'm going to ask Gloria Navarez tomorrow, or one of them we will, is the regionality of the Olympic sports. And that's kind of what you're talking about, too.
Yeah. I just don't I don't see Miami and Bay Area athletes being thrilled about that flight. That is a Syracuse, too. Just a ball breaker of a flight. Number 1, schools that aren't in it for the long haul. So that's the other thing, is that you can say all these things, and I can get to that, but ultimately the ACC has at least one school, and probably more, that aren't thinking about the long-term health of this conference. They're thinking about the long-term health of their institution. And you saw it in the Pac-12, you saw it in the Big 12, you've seen everywhere there was realignment. The schools that want to leave don't care about the place they're in. They care about the place they're going, because the place they're going can help them more. So if you have schools that aren't really, their hearts aren't in this thing, then that's going to be a bigger obstacle that you may never be able to overcome, because USC and UCLA weren't in it, especially USC. Their heart wasn't in the Pac-12 anymore. That's why it was over. Colorado's heart wasn't in the Pac-12 anymore. That's why they left. Texas and Oklahoma, their heart wasn't in the Big 12 anymore. That's why they left.
But their heart wasn't in it because the money wasn't enough.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State's been very clear about their intentions. So, I mean, you'd have to pull Notre Dame to even feel like that's salvageable. And even still, I'd need more details on what numbers we're talking about that Notre Dame would bring to see how salvageable that would really be. So without Notre Dame in the equation, it's a non-conversation to me. I mean, there's no long-term future other than the long-term future dictated by the TV contract that they're currently probably billing hours and hours and hours and hours of time with lawyers looking through those contracts. As their AD said a week or so ago, they've poured through the grant of rights and what all options are out there on the table. So, yeah, I mean, outside of Notre Dame, maybe that would slow things down, but I just don't see where Florida State, amongst the others, is satisfied with being, sticking around for another 13 years and then looking at what college football looks like by that point. That's hard to imagine.
Elias Gray, I recall complaints about traveling to Missouri from Olympic sports athletes at Tennessee. I can't imagine Oregon Rutgers, and feel there's going to be internal pressure at various uniforms. Eli Drinkwitz had some pretty good comments about that in the last few days.
Well, there's been various articles, and I don't know, I've seen it quite a bit of, this eventually, there's always the whole, well, eventually it turns into the Super League. And I don't know, I feel about 10 years worth of realignments happened in the last 2 years. It's all gone much faster than anybody could have anticipated, really. But I think that's where you look next is, all right, is football its sole property, and then everything else goes back to being more college sports, or men's basketball. Does that join it, and they're separate, and they're special in their own right, and then everything else is more of like kind of what we know now? That could be where we go. That's the only way really to think of how they could fix Rutgers versus Oregon playing softball on a Tuesday night where they're flying across country. Beyond that, I don't know how you solve it other than just gutting your way through it and dealing with it for the money.